The IC37, designed by Mark Mills, was developed to provide high-performance sailing in a strictly controlled one-design class. The IC37 was created for close one-design racing in large fleets with 20 or more boats on the starting line. The design has three key characteristics: rudder authority for maneuverability in close quarters, longitudinal stability for confident control while planing in close quarters, and a high-lift keel with adequate area for quick acceleration out of tacks and the ability to hold a lane upwind in a large fleet. The one-design restrictions on sails, gear, and equipment modification level the playing field among competitors. The sailing skills each team brings to the competition will have the most impact on how each boat performs and the overall results of the regatta. With this brief introduction, we hope to give you a look at the boat in action, especially if you've not had a chance to sail one. You'll get an idea of basic crew choreography for the primary maneuvers, and we have a few tips that can help you get around the course. This is not a guide to winning in the IC37. Those techniques are still being developed, and you'll likely have a few thoughts of your own to add in by the end of this regatta. The IC37 is a pure race boat designed to work with sailors as they look to maximize speed and strategy. The cockpit is large and wide open, sharing many of the attributes of the TP52 class, minus the pedestal grinders. We'll start with the jib tracks, which are mounted athwartships. The side-to-side position of the jib car is adjusted with a stop. It cannot be changed under load. Compared to many racer cruisers of this size, you'll notice the sheeting angles can be much tighter. Start with the jib cars all the way inboard and move them out when the mainsail starts to luff due to excess backwind. The vertical position of the floating jib fairlead is the best way to control lead tension. The control line for each lead runs to the opposite side of the companionway. The trim marks on the spreaders are identically placed on all the New York Yacht Club boats, but don't get caught thinking that the ideal trim is when the leech of the jib hits the same line on both spreaders. You'll have to determine that on your own. The lines will help you replicate trim side to side. The mainsail setup is fairly standard. The controls for the outhaul, Vang, and Cunningham are all forward. The main trimmer has the traveler and main sheet at his or her disposal. The running backstays or runners are key to controlling upwind speed. Overbend wrinkles running diagonally from the clew to the middle of the mast are a good sign that you have too much tension on the running backstays. When set up and used properly, the spinnaker takedown system will enable you to have fast, clean takedowns at the leeward mark. There's a belly cord that will suck the spinnaker into the boat. Unlike on larger yachts, it's a one-to-one purchase that must be manually pulled by the person standing right behind the companionway. We suggest putting one of your stronger sailors on this job. The tail of the takedown line runs through a floating fairlead to a ratchet block on the floor of the boat. Be sure it clicks when you're pulling it. Through another fairlead to the port side of the engine housing, and then back through a block to the back corner of the yacht. A soft shackle or loop is used to connect the tail of the spinnaker halyard to the belly cord. Another loop connects the belly cord to a short section of line that is luggage tagged to the patch in the center of the spinnaker. Be sure to confirm that the system runs smoothly through the block and fairleads. Laying out the spinnaker isn't hard, but must be done carefully. One helpful hint is to attach the belly cord first and use that to stretch out the sail. Then run the corners up to the forward hatch underneath the roller and out to the bowman, who can attach them to the appropriate lines. Once the spinnaker is all hooked up, it's a good idea to bring it forward again.
We're just pulling it forward so that when we go to set again, there's no way the retriever line can get sucked into the block or stuck on anything.
And pull as much of the slack as possible into the belly cord so it doesn't get caught up during the set.
And then I even like to make sure this is taut, so this is good to go.
All right, now we have the boat set up. Let's go sailing. As we mentioned, this isn't a guide to how to win in an IC37, so we won't get too much into the nuances of straight line speed, upwind or downwind. But we should mention that crew weight on the IC37 needs to be as active side to side as it is fore to aft. Since the boat is wedge-shaped, more heel makes the bow want to drive into the water. To compensate, you may find yourself moving the crew aft earlier up the wind range than in other boats. Remember that class rules prohibit crew from draping themselves over the lifelines to hike in heavy air. There are two good rules of thumb for most conditions about where the crew should sit. How much noise does the water make exiting the transom? If you hear a lot of gurgling noises, your crew is too far aft. The knuckle of the bow should always be about 2 inches underwater. If more than that is submerged, your crew is probably too far forward. When it comes to your upwind heel angle and sail shapes, the IC37 is optimized for 18 to 20 degrees of heel. The goal with your light air sail setup is to create as much power as possible to achieve that heel. This involves keeping the runner eased, the main sheet trimmed so that the second batten from the top is just open and the traveler is high. Your outhaul should be at maximum tension in 12 knots of wind speed or greater. As the breeze increases, tensioning both the vang and the running backstay will flatten and depower the sail plan. With the wide open cockpit, tacking is relatively straightforward. Still, there can be a lot of traffic going across the boat, so choreographing each crew person's path to the other side and doing so for a variety of wind conditions will make a big difference. Let's start with the jib. Remember that class rules prohibit cross-sheeting the jib sheets. 2 people are enough to tack the headsail in most any breeze. The primary trimmer goes down to the winch as the team prepares to tack. Note that the new winch has been preloaded with the new jib sheet. 3 or 4 wraps is sufficient, and the winch handle. As the boat turns and the jib unloads, the primary trimmer eases the old sheet and strips off the wraps. The offside trimmer comes off the rail right before the tack, grabs the new sheet, and trims it in as the boat goes past head to wind and carries the jib tail to the new windward side. The trimmer who just released the old sheet slides to leeward, passing behind the other trimmer, and does the final grind, if needed, before taking full control of the jib sheet. The offside trimmer hops on the rail and then reloads the windward winch to prepare for the next tack. The main is even more straightforward. Make sure to cleat the old sheet going into the tack, and during the tack, move the traveler cars to the appropriate position for the new tack. In lighter air, a little more power out of the tack will help the boat accelerate. But you knew that already, didn't you? In moderate to heavy air, the running backstays are a 2-person job. Usually this means the pit or bow person, who have moved aft as the wind increases to keep the bow up, will help by releasing the old runner. The stronger the wind, the more of a head start you'll want on the new runner. Hand tension it and load the winch with 4 wraps, including the self-tailer, before the tack. As the boat starts to turn head to wind, you can start grinding in the new runner, but be sure to release the old runner just as the mainsail starts to fill in the new tack to avoid damage to the main or compromising the helmsman's ability to control the boat coming out of the tack. Okay, so you've made it to the windward mark. Let's get the kite up and go downwind. If you've done a bear-away set on a sprit boat before, the mechanics of this maneuver will be familiar. The line to pull out the sprit is on the starboard side of the companionway, right next to the line controlling the up and down of the port jib lead. Remember that class rules forbid extending the sprit before the bow passes the windward mark, but do allow it to be done on the offset leg. While the sprit is coming out, the bow person can start to pull the tack through the forward hatch, being careful not to let it get away. Once the pit person has extended the sprit, it's time to put the tack out to the end of the pole. An assist from the bow, feeding the tack under the jib and through the pulpit, will help. The hobble, the yellow line that runs through a cleat in the center of the deck just forward of the hatch, can control the jib on off-wind legs in the event you need to free up the primary winch for the spinnaker sheet. We recommend cross-sheeting the spinnaker to the windward winch. Putting a lot of slack into the starboard spinnaker sheet will help ensure the spinnaker can be trimmed properly right after the hoist. Some teams will do this before the start and tape the coil to a stanchion. Just remember to break the tape before the set. The jib halyard will need to be removed from the winch so you can use it for the spinnaker halyard. You'll lose a bit of tension on the jib luff when you do this, so wait until you've rounded the windward mark and are on the offset leg. A little sneak on the head of the spinnaker will make it easier to hoist, but be careful not to pull too much sail through the hatch before turning downwind. Wind and water can grab a hold of the kite and quickly suck the sail over the side. That's a worst-case scenario. Timing the trim of the spinnaker sheet so it's tensioned just as the sail gets to full hoist takes some time, but that's why you practice. Most teams will leave the jib up in heavy air and take it down when it's light. What's the crossover for this? That's still being decided and depends upon a few factors in addition to wind speed. Experiment to find what works best for your crew. If you do leave the jib up, be sure to set the hobble line once you bear away. A tight jib sheet will make trimming the spinnaker difficult. Ready to jibe? Let's go. This is an all-hands maneuver. There's a lot to do. Among the most important jobs during the jibe is releasing the old runner. Forgetting to do that before the main crosses the center line is a recipe for a wipeout. As with most maneuvers, there's more than one correct way to jibe an IC37. We like to lead the new spinnaker sheet under the loaded one and then put 1 or 2 wraps on the winch. This means that the trimmer pulling on the new sheet will need to position themselves forward of the 2 lines, right behind the companionway. It's a little tight, but it does enable the person easing the spinnaker to strip the winch once the line unloads and lift the old sheet up to keep it out of the new sheet. 1 or 2 people pulling on the new sheet at the shrouds will help get the spinnaker around quickly. Pulling the new sheet back and down is the best method to get the luff to invert and fill on the new jibe. If you're sailing with the jib up, someone will need to control the hobble through the jibe. The hobble is self-tacking and remains attached to the jib at all times. Giving it a tug as the stern passes through the wind will help it flop to the new side and avoid the upper battens wrapping, which can be a huge problem later when you want to turn upwind. Once the battens are flopped over, be sure to ease it out and help the spinnaker fill. Remember that a tight jib sheet will definitely have a negative impact on how the spinnaker flies. The boat will load up quickly on the new jibe, so be ready for a quick ease on the spinnaker sheet to get the boat to flatten out. Then it's time to find the best VMG angle for that wind speed and sea state while the forward crew cleans up and gets ready for the next maneuver. Based on past Invitational Cup regattas, no area of the course is more fraught with danger than the leeward mark, especially considering the closing speeds with a pole that is extending 7.5 feet in front of the boat. Nothing can turn a good race bad faster than a poor spinnaker douse. The retrieval line is a huge help, but don't get carried away and carry the spinnaker until the bow reaches the leeward mark. For both windward side and leeward side takedowns, time the drop with a decisive turn down to unload the spinnaker. You'll find in a big breeze, a successful conservative takedown will always gain a point or 2 at each leeward gate. Understand your crew strengths from the mast forward and set them up for a successful mark rounding. Depending on the takedown, they may need more time. Just prior to the start of the halyard drop, preload the takedown retriever line and remove any slack. A decisive turn down to unload the spinnaker should be timed at the exact instance when the halyard is released and the takedown line is pulled off. Blow the sheet and halyard while the takedown line is being hauled. All the load is now out of the sail and the belly is aimed at the hatch. The bow person can assist the retriever line by also pulling down while focusing on getting the middle foot of the kite up to keep the tack inside the lifelines. The floater assists from the middle of the kite to the clew, making sure no cloth is over the lifelines. If you divide up the foot, keep pulling until you reach the corners. The kite should never end up in the water. When the foot and belly are under control, blow the pole while the bow team is gathering the tack line. This helps bring the pole in. The tack is released with the pole after the foot is in control and on deck or in the hatch. The tack line is then pulled into the hatch until the knot stops at the clutch, and the pole is pulled in. If it happens at the same time, the tack release will help bring the pole in, and the tack will be the last corner inside the hatch. Before heading upwind, be sure to put the jib halyard on the pit winch and put the proper tension on it. A windward douse is much the same, but with one extra step. You'll need to get the spinnaker around the bow and onto the windward side. Hauling on the lazy sheet from both the cockpit and the foredeck will ensure this gets around quickly. The further back you can get the clue, the easier the douse will go. Getting it back to the windward shrouds before you start to drop the halyard is a good goal.
We have a cross coming up here. Be ready.
In a crossing situation, when the port tack boat needs to duck the starboard tacker, the main and vang will need to be eased. The jib may also need to be eased. Before easing the main, be sure to check that the leeward running backstay tail is not in the self-tailer and will be able to run. If the lazy running backstay doesn't run, it may prevent the main from being eased, making it difficult to turn down, and can lead to collisions in tight quarters. It's also important to remember to completely ease the vang during the duck. In addition to the suggestions mentioned over the last few minutes, it's good to keep in mind some of the other factors that will impact your performance. Smart tactics, good sail trim, crew placement, and the ability to adapt to changing conditions will all have an impact on the boat's performance. Racing an IC37 will provide you with a fast, fun, and competitive sailing platform that performs well in a wide range of conditions. By taking these performance tips into consideration, you'll increase your team's chances of success.